sinus is called as frontal sinus because it's there in the frontal bone. And maxillary sinus, it's called maxillary sinus because it's there in the maxilla bone. In the previous session, I asked you to palpate the area just below the eyelid. You can feel a bone structure, I said. Yes, within this bone structure, this structure is air filled, and hence you can see the maxillary sinus. Okay, so moving on to trachea. Air entering the trachea or windpipe from the larynx. See, here, trachea is called as the windpipe. In the previous session, we studied about esophagus. Esophagus is called as the food pipe. If somebody could remember something about esophagus.
It is the first entry. Yeah, it is the first entry into the stomach area.
Very good, very good. Yes. So similarly here we have trachea, which is branching up into bronchi. Okay. So air entering the trachea or windpipe from the larynx travels down its length to the level of the fifth thoracic vertebrae, which is approximately mid-chest. Okay. So this is just a passage for the air to come from the larynx to the bronchi. Okay. The trachea is lined with ciliated mucosa that beat continuously and in a direction opposite to that of the incoming air as they propel mucus loaded with dust particles and other debris away from the lungs to the throat, where it can be swallowed or spat out. Now, this is the mechanism how we are able to expectorate, how we are able to spit out the mucus, So the cilia, see, whenever we see through the trachea, the air will be coming downwards. But the cilia will be moving upwards. So that if there is excess amount of mucus, it can be expelled out. Okay, that's the function of the cilia. So support and patency, cough reflex, warming, humidifying, and filtering. Main bronchi. When I say bronchi, you should be able to picture. So here, this is one bronchi. This is another bronchi. The fusion where these both bronchi separate is called as the carina. Main bronchi, the right and left main bronchi are formed by the division of the trachea. Location: each main bronchus runs obliquely before it plunges into the medial depression of the lung on its own side. The right main bronchus is wider, shorter, and straighter than the left. That's okay. So what you should understand is trachea further divides into bronchi. Trachea continues and further divides into, if it's if you're telling about one, it's bronchus. If you're telling about two, it is bronchi. So trachea further branches into bronchi. Now, these bronchi, so we studied, I told you in the previous there, this is the trachea, then this whole thing is one bronchi, So to the what you are seeing to the right side of the screen is the left bronchi, to the right left side of the screen is the right bronchi. Now these bronchi are further branching. They are called as the bronchioles. And these bronchioles will end up in alveoli. Now here, your friend had a question regarding the space for heart. Here you can see a notch. Here in the structure of the lung, you can see a notch. Here in the structure of the lung, you can see a notch. Here, whatever you can see a depression or a cave or a notch, this is the notch where the heart will stay. This is the notch where the heart will be located. Now, respiratory bronchioles are important structures. Each lobule is supplied with air by a terminal bronchiole, which further subdivides into respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and large number of alveoli. Okay. Now, 1 second. Yes. So now here what we can see is this is the trachea. Identify this. This is the trachea. This is one bronchus. This is another bronchus. Bronchus is further divided into bronchioles. Now what you can see, the final branch. Now those branches are having these air-filled structures called alveoli. They are having these air-filled structures called alveoli. Now, this alveoli is an important structure of the respiratory system where there is exchange of gases taking place, where there is excess of gases, exchange of gas taking place. Now, these are about 150 million alveoli in the adult lung. In these structures, that the process of gas exchange occurs. So, in the alveoli, we have gaseous exchange. As airways progressively divide and become smaller and smaller, their walls gradually become thinner. There is further division of these branches. There's further division, and hence their walls become thinner and thinner. Yes, that's appreciated. These distal respiratory passages are supported by a loose network of elastic connective tissue. Okay. So one thing what you need to understand is the parts of the respiratory system are nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchus, bronchioles. Bronchioles end up in alveoli. Alveoli is the structural and functional unit of respiratory system where there is exchange of gases taking place. Exchange of gases taking place. Now, coming to the external respiration. This is exchange of gases by diffusion between the alveoli and the blood. Okay. And also, it acts as the defense against microbes. Protective cells present within the lung tissue include lymphocytes and plasma cells, which produce antibodies. So, they produce certain antibodies, and hence, we are able to fight the respiratory issues, the lower respiratory tract issues, and also it helps in exchange of gases. Yes. So, this is one perfect picture for us to understand. So, here what we can see, studying the lungs proper. So here what we can see to the right side is the left lung, and to the left side is the right lung. Here you can see our right side, right lung. This is the left lung. Uh, the images are opposite to the way it's located in the human body. Whenever you're studying images, assume a person standing in front of you. Assume a person standing in front of you, then you will come to know. Okay, so here this lung is the left lung. Left lung has a cardiac notch. Left lung has a cardiac notch. What you can see here is a cardiac notch, and this structure here is the heart. This structure here is the heart, and here we have two lobes, superior lobe and an inferior lobe. Left lung has two lobes, superior lobe, inferior lobe, and a cardiac notch, whereas the right lung has three lobes, superior, middle, and inferior lobe. Right lung has three lobes, superior, middle, and inferior lobe. I said the diaphragm separates the chest organs from the abdominal organs. Diaphragm separates the chest organs from the abdominal organs. So here what we can see is the trachea. Here what we can see is the trachea. What we can see here, blue and red are the major blood vessels of the heart. Major blood vessels of the heart. We come across this space between the two lungs as called as the mediastinum. This space is called as the mediastinum. Okay. Any questions still here?
Doc, why does the right hand side have three lobes compared to the left hand side? I know that the heart is there on the left hand side, but what is the reason for the three lobes?
No, that's the same reason, no? Since here, see, one thing is it is God's creation. The understanding is because to the left side, the heart has to be accommodated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The lungs occupy the entire thoracic cavity except for the most central area, that is the mediastinum. Okay, I told you. Here, this space is called the mediastinum. This space, wherever you see the structure, that is the mediastinum. Okay. The narrow superior portion of each lung, the apex is called deep to the clavicle. Okay. So here, what you can see, So here what we can see, uh, this part is called the apex. This part is called the apex, and this is called as the base. This is called as the base. This part is called as the apex. It is just lying beneath the clavicle. It is lying just beneath the clavicle. The broad lung area resting on the diaphragm is the base. So here this structure is called the base. This structure is called the base, and this is called the apex. It has an apex, it has base, and it has two lobes. The left, the two pair, it's a pair of lungs. The left lung has two lobes, the right lung has three lobes. Okay, the lungs are divided into lobes. The left lung is composed of the upper, the lower, and the lingular or the smaller lobe. The right lung is composed of the upper, middle, and lower lobes. Okay, so here again he says there's a structure called as lingula. Again, that is a small structure, that's a narrow structure, that's not depicted here. Okay, shape, it's cone like structure, weighing 600 to 700 gram, 20 to 24 centimeter, color pinkish. It is pinkish. It is grayish in cases of chronic smokers or people who are exposed to dust or working in industrial or factory areas. Okay, yes, again structure of lobes, lungs. So this is the trachea dividing into bronchus, superior lobe, inferior lobe, and here we have a cardiac notch. Here we have a superior lobe, middle lobe, and inferior lobe. Superior, middle, and inferior lobe. Now, these lungs are being protected. Now, these lungs are being protected. How? The lungs are having a covering called as the pleura. The lungs are having a covering called as pleura. The surface of each lung is covered with a visceral pleura and a parietal pleura. See, pleura is nothing but a covering on the lungs. What we can see here. See, if we assume this is the lung, then pleura will be just one more coating over this lung. It is just like how we drape ourselves with clothes. It's a similar way that the lungs are draped in pleura. The lungs are draped in pleura. Now, again, this pleura is having two layers. One is the parietal pleura and another one is the visceral pleura. One is the parietal pleura, the other one is the visceral pleura. Viscera refers to organs. Viscera refers to organs. So, visceral pleura is the pleural membrane which adheres to the lung, Parietal pleura is just another layer over the visceral pleura. Okay, so assuming that each lung is draped with two clothes, the one adhering to the skin is the visceral, the one adhering to the lungs is the visceral pleura, and the one adhering to the this thing, to the skeletal muscles, to the muscles of respiration, etc., is the parietal pleura. The outside layer is the parietal pleura. The inner layer is the visceral pleura. Visceral pleura is adhered to the lung. Okay. Now, between these visceral pleura and parietal pleura, there is a space. Between the visceral pleura and parietal pleura, there is a space. That space is called as the pleural space. That space is called as the pleural space. The lungs are held tightly to the thorax wall, and the pleural space is more of a potential. Now, between in this pleural space, there is something called as a pleural fluid. There is something called as a pleural fluid. Okay, did we come across any secretions in the stomach like this? We came across any fluids in the stomach yesterday, or any liquid? People are not doing homework. Okay. Yes, we came across gastric secretion. We said there is HCl which is secreted, gastric. Okay, so now between the visceral pleura and parietal pleura is the pleural fluid. Now, the pleural membranes produce pleural fluid, a slippery serous secretion which allows the lungs to glide easily over the thorax wall during breathing movements and cause the two pleural layers to cling together. Now, this pleural fluid helps the two pleural layers to remain attached, and also it allows the lung for easy movement during respiration. Next, Bronchioles. The smallest of the conducting passageways are the bronchioles. So that is the bronchi further branching to bronchioles. Moving on to alveoli. The terminal branches lead to the respiratory zone structures, even smaller conduits that eventually terminate into alveoli or the airspace. Now, respiratory zone. The respiratory zone, which includes the respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, alveolar sacs, and the alveoli, is the only site of gaseous exchange. Okay, so I'll just show you the image. Now you have to tell me what are the structures I'll be pointing out. What is this structure I'm pointing at? What is the name of this?
The trachea.
Perfect. What is this?
Is that the bronchi?
Yeah, bronchus. Plural is a bronchi.
Bronchus.
Correct. This.
So it's further separating into the bronchioles.
Perfect. And these?
The alveoli. Alveoli.
Yeah. Alveoli. Correct. Anybody else wants to answer?
There's 50 million of them.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Good. Yes. So I told you there's a structure which divides or which separates the thoracic organs from the abdominal organs. So here what you can see, this is the structure of a diaphragm. This is a structure of a diaphragm. This is a structure of a diaphragm. This diaphragm is a muscular structure which separates the thorax from the abdomen, which separates the thorax from the abdomen. And this whole lungs, these all lungs are protected by the rib cage. These lungs are protected by the rib cage. These lungs are protected by rib cage. Protected by the rib cage. Yes. Now, so again, parts of the respiratory system: nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, lungs, diaphragm. Okay. Now, going on to the respiration proper. The term respiration means exchange of gases between body cells and the environment. Breathing is the movement of air in and out of the lungs. Yes. All we have yoga experts here, so I don't have to tell anything about breathing much. Okay. Exchange of gases takes place in two forms. One is the external respiration. The other one is the internal respiration. External respiration is gases exchange between the pulmonary blood and the alveoli. Now, what we saw till now, we were studying alveoli. So, alveoli and blood come in contact with each other. Alveoli will give out oxygen and pulmonary blood will give out carbon dioxide. That respiration is called as external respiration. Internal respiration is at systemic capillaries. Gas exchange must be made between the blood and the tissue cells. That is the internal respiration. We have two types of respiration: external respiration and internal respiration. External respiration. External respiration refers to gas exchange across the respiratory membrane in the lungs. So when we say respiratory membrane, it is the whole that alveoli structures. Each alveolar wall is 1 cell thick and surrounded by a network of tiny capillaries. Alveoli is supported or is surrounded by tiny capillaries. So alveoli will give out oxygen, capillaries will give out carbon dioxide. So when we are inhaling oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide diffuses from venous blood down its concentration gradient into the alveoli. By the same process, oxygen diffuses from the alveoli into the blood. So external respiration is taking place between the alveoli and the pulmonary blood, or exchange between the alveoli and the blood. Alveoli, we are breathing in, we are inhaling oxygen. So as we inhale, oxygen is given out and the blood in turn will give out carbon dioxide. So as we exhale, we are exhaling carbon dioxide. So we are working on external respiration. Now, internal respiration. Internal respiration refers to gaseous exchange across the respiratory membrane in the metabolizing tissues like your skeletal muscles. For example, blood arriving at the tissues has been cleansed of its carbon dioxide and saturated with oxygen during its passage through the lungs. Therefore, has a higher oxygen and lower carbon dioxide than the tissues. So this concentration gradients between the capillary blood and the tissues leads to gaseous exchange. Oxygen diffuses from the bloodstream through the capillary walls into the tissues, and carbon dioxide diffuses from the cells into the extracellular fluid, then into the bloodstream towards the venous end of the capillaries. Okay, now there is the gaseous exchange between the blood and the skeletal tissues. So we are all aware of skeletal muscles. So here there is exchange of gases between the blood and the tissues. So blood is having more of oxygen and the tissues are having carbon dioxide. So the oxygen from the blood goes into the tissues and the carbon dioxide from the tissues comes into the blood. Carbon dioxide from the tissues comes into the blood. Now, is this point clear? Hello?
Yes, Doc.
Okay, I will repeat here. Going back to the previous slide, alveoli is having oxygen and the blood here is having carbon dioxide. Alveoli will give out oxygen and the blood will give out carbon dioxide. So in turn, alveoli will give away oxygen and take the carbon dioxide. Here what is happening? Blood is having more of oxygen and the tissues are having carbon dioxide. Blood will give its oxygen and take away the carbon dioxide from the tissues. Take away the carbon dioxide from the tissues. Now, once it has taken the carbon dioxide from the tissues, now this will reach the lung and again lung will give oxygen. It will take away the carbon dioxide which the blood is having. Hope you are able to get the link. Okay. Now, transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide is essential for internal respiration to occur. Oxygen is carried in the blood in as combination of with hemoglobin as oxyhemoglobin. Oxygen along with hemoglobin is oxyhemoglobin and carbon dioxide along with blood is known as carbaminohemoglobin. Okay, next, mechanics of breathing. Mechanics of breathing. Okay, so what's happening in breathing is there is volume change which leads to pressure changes, which leads to the flow of gases to equalize pressure. Flow of gases to equalize the pressure. Okay, now all of us here are participants of yoga. So please can you tell me whenever you're inspiring, what is that you're able to feel? Where we are doing the inspiration and all. So what is it? What is that it is happening to our body whenever we are doing inspiration? What is the change that you feel? So you might be yoga instructors. You may be telling people to appreciate some kind of changes in the body whenever you are inspiring or expiring. You may be wrong or you may be right. No issues.
When you're taking in air, it's possibility of you feeling lighter because the lungs is containing air, oxygen.
Okay.
So you feel lighter, and when you're expelling, you feel slightly more heavier.
Okay. Anybody else wants to add on? Yeah, that's okay. That's acceptable. Next.
Okay. When you breathe in, your diaphragm, the upper part, which is the chest, the lungs, expands, and the digestive system as well expands. So there's more oxygen, and when you exhale, both inflates. So there's more carbon dioxide, oxygen is being released through the system.
Okay. You are somewhere nearer. Anybody else wants to add on?
Doc, when you breathe in, does the diaphragm extend downwards?
Yes. Diaphragm is dome shaped like structure what we saw. See, diaphragm is dome-shaped like structure. So diaphragm will depress. Diaphragm will depress. Assuming, say, what is happening in case of the lungs is, as you assume lungs as a pair of balloons. Assume lungs as a pair of balloons. Once you inflate the balloon, once you push air into the balloon inflates. So inspiration is nothing but an inflation. Inflation. So one, you have two balloons which are not filled with air. Once you push air into it, the balloon will grow in size or will become bigger in size. Now, if we want the lung to be bigger in size, what it has to do? It has to push the diaphragm downwards. It has to push the ribs which are covering it outwards. It has to push the diaphragm downwards. It has to push the ribs upwards and outwards. Okay. See, air is flowing into the lungs. Chest is expanded laterally. That means chest is expanded to the side. The rib cage is elevated. Diaphragm is depressed and flattened. Lungs are stretched to the larger thoracic volume, causing the intrapulmonary pressure to fall. Causing the intrapulmonary pressure to fall. And the air flows into the lungs. And the air flows into the lungs. So understand this. Don't simply just by heart. So assuming these pair of lungs to be an empty balloons, if you want the balloons to be filled with air, we blow in air. What will happen? If the air is blown to these lungs, it will push the structures. So it will push the diaphragm downwards. It will push the ribs and the muscles outwards. Okay, and then the lungs also will increase in size. Lungs also will increase in size. Okay, so that is those are the changes happening when you are inspiring. Inspiring is breathing in. Okay. Now this is the active process. Inspiration is the breathing process which is initiated by the medulla oblongata. We have the respiratory center in the medulla oblongata. Okay. Now expiration. Now expiration is another event which is due to the elastic recoil of the lungs. Now we had balloons, we had empty balloons, we filled them with air. Now if we deflate the balloons, what will happen? When we deflate it, air will leave the lungs, the chest is depressed and the lateral dimensions are reduced, rib cage is descended and the diaphragm is elevated. Diaphragm had come down, now diaphragm will move up and up again attain its dome shape. Lungs recoil to a smaller volume, intrapulmonary pressure rises and air flows out of the lung. Air flows out of the lung. Are these, have you understood this? Is it acceptable?
Yes, doc.
Still, I will further repeat inspiration and expiration. Inspiration, as you intake the air, as you respire air, as you breathe in, the air is going into the lungs. How the what all is supporting for the air to go into the lungs? The chest is expanding laterally, that is sidewards. Rib cage is elevated. Diaphragm is depressed and flattened. Lungs are stretched to the larger thoracic volume, causing a fall in the intrapulmonary pressure and flow of air into the lungs. Now expiration. Expiration is we are going to expel the air out of the lungs. So what it will do? The chest is depressed, lateral dimensions are reduced, the rib cage which had risen up will come back to its original shape. Diaphragm which was depressed and flat will become elevated and dome shaped. Lungs will recoil to a smaller volume. Intrapulmonary pressure rises and the air is exhaled out of the lungs. Air is exhaled out of the lungs. Now, for all of us, we are all doing, now I'm giving a lecture, you are listening to my session. So we are doing a normal quiet breathing. So when we are doing a normal quiet breathing, intercostal muscles and the diaphragm are involved. They are the muscles. So here, these are the intercostal muscles. So what are these structures? Can somebody tell me? Can you tell me what is this structure? What is this structure of?
like a muscle plate.
The pulmonary.
Okay, okay. I'll just pinpoint some structures. See, can we see these? I taught you as they are flat bones. What are these?
Ribs.
They are 12 pairs. Perfect. So they are ribs. Okay. We have 12 pairs of ribs. These ribs protect the lungs. These ribs protect the lungs. We came across this bone also. What is this?
Sternum.
Sternum.
Perfect. Yes. So we came across this. Our friends told us it's called as collarbone, beauty bone. All of you, I made all of you palpate this bone.
Mhm.
It's the clavicle. Okay.
Clavicle, yes.
Now we studied something called as apex of the lung. So can somebody remember? I told you apex. The lung has two parts: the apex and the base. Base rests on the diaphragm. Yeah. So here, this is the apex of the lung. This is the apex of the lung. This is the apex of the lung. This is the base of the lung. The base of the lung rests on the diaphragm, and the apex is lying just beneath the clavicle. Apex is lying just beneath the clavicle. So when we say clavicle, it is under this bone. It is under this bone. Clavicle are two in number under this bone. Now, between these ribs, we have intercostal muscles. We have external intercostal muscles and internal intercostal muscles. We have external intercostal muscles and internal intercostal muscles. Okay, these muscles also help us in respiration. Now, so we are doing normal quiet breathing. It is these intercostal muscles that are helping us in respiration. But sometimes you see people gasping for breath. Sometimes you see people gasping for breath. In those conditions, it is the muscles of the neck, shoulders, and abdomen. All these are assisting in respiration. All these are assisting in respiration during difficult times. Whenever they are doing a very deep breathing, then they see that the muscles of the neck, shoulders, and abdomen are also moving. Now, these intercostal muscles. So, intercostal muscles are the muscles which are lying in between the ribs, which are lying in between the ribs. Now, there are 11 pairs of intercostal muscles. Why? Because we have 12 pairs of ribs. Between one pair, we have one pair of intercostal muscles. So, we have 11 pairs of intercostal muscles. We have external intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscles. When the intercostal muscles contract, they pull all the other ribs towards the first rib. That is, they move it towards the first rib, towards the upper part. Because of the shape and size of the ribs, they move outwards when pulled upwards, enlarging. So we studied that when we are inhaling, the ribs are moving upwards. How are these ribs moving upwards? It is because of these intercostal muscles. It is because of these intercostal muscles. Okay. Now, can somebody? I will display inspiration on. I'll display that. Just read that. One of you can read. Then I'll change the slide. Then you have to explain to me inspiration. Okay. This, all of us being from the yoga background, I expect all of you should know this. Okay. Any one of you can unmute and read, or if you can tell it, you can tell inspiration process. Anyone? First.
Okay, I can read off.
Yeah.
Inspiration is the active part of the breathing process, which is initiated by the respiratory control center in medulla oblongata, which is the brainstem. Air is flowing into the lungs. The chest is expanded laterally. The rib cage is elevated. Yes, the rib cage is elevated. The diaphragm is depressed and flattened. Lungs are stretched to the larger thoracic volume, causing the interpulmonary pressure to fall and air to flow into the lungs.
Okay. Yes. Somebody can explain now this to me. I will put expirations, right? Can somebody explain inspiration?
Okay, I will read it. Its expiration is a passive event due to elastic recoil of the lungs. Air is leaving the lungs, the chest is depressed, and the lateral dimension is reduced. The rib cage is descended, and the diaphragm is elevated and dome shaped. Lungs recoil to a smaller volume, intrapulmonary pressure rises, and air flows out of the lungs.
Oh, right. Can somebody explain now? Can someone explain inspiration? Can someone explain inspiration?
Okay, I can try it out.
Indeed. Okay.
Yeah,
So, yes. Okay.
yeah, you can. I'll give the opportunity to the next person after her. Yeah. Mala.
Okay, so I continue now.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so when we breathe, air is entering into our lungs. The lungs expand. It's like a balloon, so the lungs expand. The rib cage moves outwards. It gets expanded. The chest I think also moves slightly. I'm not sure whether it moves slightly, but it also gets expanded. The diaphragm, the diaphragm goes depresses, so it goes down.
Yeah, diaphragm goes down. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's the expiration. I mean the inspiration.
Oh, good. Good. Now she said the ribcage moves upwards and outwards. How I want to tell this point, the ribcage moves upwards and outwards. How is it moving? It is moving with the help of the intercostal muscles. These intercostal muscles, we have external intercostal and internal intercostal. There are 11 pairs of these muscles. There are 11 pairs of these intercostal muscles. Now, gas transport, oxygen is transported. Okay. Meanwhile, before this, is your inspiration and expiration clear? And yes, one of them wanted to say something. No, you can say.
I just wanted to find out, doctor, when people are doing bodybuilding, is the intercostal muscles, that what they're increasing in size? And does that have any impact on the inspiration, expiration as well?
So I don't think so that it is going at the level of the intercostal muscles.
Okay.
Because they are more concerned towards the muscles of the biceps, triceps, and the deltoid.
And the upper part of the chest itself, especially for
That
men.
that will be the pectoral muscles. They're
Yes,
concentrating on
yes.
pectoral. Okay.
Now, by
Pectoral
them,
muscles to the muscles of the abdomen.
by them increasing the size of that muscle, now, does it has any effect on the respiratory system?
No, it won't. It won't.
What? Okay. I don't know if I should ask this question now.
Yeah. Somebody wants.
How does smoking affect the lungs itself and drugs as well? And does alcohol also, large volumes of alcohol, does that also affect the breathing within the person itself?
See, one thing is alcohol affects more on the liver. Alcohol is having effect on the liver. Now, smoking has effect on the lungs. Smoking has effect on the lungs. It is these. It will destroy the alveoli. It will destroy the alveoli. And on postmortem or on dissection, we see that we studied that the lungs, the pair of lungs, they are pink in color. These will become gray or smoky, smoky black, or the grayish color will be the color of the lungs. Color of the lungs. Okay. The lungs will be prevented from doing its normal act. See, we are supposed to give in oxygen to the lungs, but we are also giving certain polluted air to the lungs. So the cilia, everywhere we came across cilia, the brush border, which helps in driving away the foreign bodies. But if you're exposing yourself to the foreign body, obviously it will be driven in, and hence it will affect the
Doc, does it form like a tar-like substance covering the bronchioles and the alveoli?
yeah.
Okay.
But it is not like that. It is not that. See, the color of the lungs itself will change. The color of the lungs itself will change.
Okay.
Therefore, the people who smoke very heavily, they will have problems like even climbing a hill or excessive exercises, or long-term walking in the breathing itself, the grasping for breath.
Hmm. See, thing here, what we could see understanding pathologically is that we came across a picture of alveoli. Okay, so here we see alveoli is healthy, but here we see alveoli is contaminated. Now this is the normal alveoli. Here it is pneumonia as a condition wherein the air space is filled with fluid. Air space is filled with fluid. But such a presentation we won't see in this thing, cigarette smokers. Okay, pneumonia may be one of the conditions for them to suffer. Okay, it's not like that. See, you told tar like substance, so tar will not be filled here. Tar will not be filled here. It is just like, see, you have a plant which is exposed to the fresh air. You have a plant which is exposed to the polluted air. So obviously, you see a polluted air plant, it will have a coating which is dusty. Okay, whereas a plant which is exposed to the fresh air will appear green, whereas which is exposed to the polluted air will appear brown.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Now, how can, if a person who's been smoking and stop smoking, what can we do or advise them to recondition that part of this alveoli?
Alveoli. Ask
Yes.
him to do pranayama. You're all yoga experts. Ask them to do pranayama.
Hmm. Okay.
Ask them to do
That
pranayama or all the different breathing techniques, whatever you people are aware of. Breathing techniques are
yes. Okay. And anything else, like any plant extracts or anything of that sort, for them to
just
strengthen it?
just a minute, Reggie. Just go through this video. This is in context with the next part of the topic. That is the
Okay.
spirometry. We'll get back
Hmm.
to that.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. People got asthma as well use that.
Hmm.
Okay.
So this is the spirometer. So we'll be seeing how the spirometer works. Yeah. So here, pulmonary function test. Pulmonary function test. We are using spirometer. We are using spirometer to perform this pulmonary function test. Now, these spirometers, uh, it was used as one of the rehab techniques for the COVID patients. It was used as one of the rehab techniques for COVID patients. Now, we saw a pipe there. Through the pipe, they would exhale and then they would breathe through that pipe. Okay. So once they expire out there, what will happen? The ball rises. The ball rises. Okay. It rises, and you should see that you are able to hold your breath. You are able to hold your breath and slowly leave that ball. Slowly leave that ball. So spirometers are in use till date, and even before surgeries also we are making them use spirometers. Now, what does this spirometer do? The spirometer will tell us these volumes: tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, etc. Just I have put in this, you will be getting slides, go home and read, because if I explain this, I don't know how many of you will grasp it. Moving on to another part, that is the ventilation. Ventilation is the rate at which, before I go on to ventilation, give me some time, I will go ahead with this, then I'll give you some time to ask your questions. Ventilation is the rate at which air enters or leaves the lungs. Ventilation in respiratory physiology is of two types. So ventilation is the rate at which the air enters the lungs. So pulmonary ventilation and alveolar ventilation. Pulmonary ventilation is defined as the volume of air moving in and out of the respiratory tract in a given unit of time during quiet breathing. We are all having breathing, so we breathe around 16 to 18 times per minute. So pulmonary ventilation is just that amount of air moving in and out of respiratory tract. Now, when I say respiratory tract, what all pictures, what all parts of the parts of the lungs will come into your picture? As I said, pulmonary ventilation is defined as the volume of air moving in and out of the respiratory tract in a given unit of time during quiet breathing. What are the structures?
Maybe your bronchioles, the alveoli.
Yeah, it is from the nose till the alveoli, everything comes into picture.
The
Okay.
entire, okay.
Yeah, the entire system. It is also called as minute ventilation or respiratory minute volume. Pulmonary ventilation is a cyclic process by which fresh air enters the lungs and an equal volume of air leaves the lungs. So whatever air is entering, it is going to leave out also. There is an inhalation followed by an exhalation. Okay. Now this is pulmonary ventilation. It is the amount of air entering the lungs and leaving the lungs. Next, normal value of pulmonary ventilation is 6 liters per minute. 6 liters per minute. Okay, let us not go into the calculation. Next, alveolar ventilation. Alveolar ventilation is the amount of air utilized for gaseous exchange every minute. Now, so pulmonary ventilation was just the amount of air coming in and going out. It is like you have kept a stall, you have opened a stall, or you have kept a shop. So it is the amount of people coming and going from the shop. You are not concerned about the number of customers. You have a shop that's open. Your pulmonary ventilation is something like number of footfalls or number of customers visiting your shop. Alveolar ventilation is when you have a shop, number of customers buying articles from the shop, right? You're able to understand. Assuming you are holding you have opened up a new shop or a restaurant, wherein you see pulmonary ventilation is like number of people visiting your shop, whereas alveolar ventilation is number of people visiting your shop and buying goods from the shop. Okay, so now alveolar ventilation is the amount of air utilized for gases exchange every minute. Amount of air utilized for, please all of you kindly mute yourselves. I cannot keep doing it every time. Okay, alveolar ventilation is the amount of air utilized for gases exchange every minute. Now, it is not only the amount of air entering, but they are concerned about the amount of air utilized for gaseous exchange every minute. Alveolar ventilation is different from pulmonary ventilation. Perfect. Why? Pulmonary ventilation was the amount of air entering and leaving the lungs, whereas alveolar ventilation is amount of air that is utilized for gaseous exchange. See, our purpose of the lungs is to do the gaseous exchange. In pulmonary ventilation, 6 liters of air moves in and out of the respiratory tract every minute, but the whole volume of air is not utilized for gaseous exchange. Volume of air subjected for gaseous exchange is the alveolar ventilation. Now, air is trapped in the respiratory passage, does not take part in gaseous exchange. Now, normal value of alveolar ventilation is 4.2 liters. 4.2 liters. So, it is the 6 liters of air that we breathe in and out in 1 minute. It is 4.2 liters of air that is utilized for gaseous exchange. It is 4.2 liters of air that we are using for gaseous exchange. Is this clear?
Yes, Doc.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. So pranayama does have a huge value system on the breathing itself. Would it increase the volume taken in and volume taken out and the quality of it?
Yes. Now, we have something called as dead space. Now, we said 6 liter of air we are inhaling and exhaling, and 4.2 liter is being utilized for gaseous exchange. Now, what is happening to the 1.8 liter of air now? Dead space is defined as the part of the respiratory tract where gaseous exchange does not take place. See, gaseous exchange is taking place at what level in the lungs? Where is the gaseous exchange taking place in lungs? We studied something called as external respiration.
Doc,
Where
can
is
you
gas?
just repeat? Yeah, can you just repeat what you've said?
Where is the gaseous exchange taking place in the lungs?
In the alveolar.
Perfect. It is taking place in the alveoli. Perfect. So, dead space is defined as the part of the respiratory tract where gaseous exchange does not take place. So, we have now air present in the dead space is called as dead space air. Now, we have two parts, anatomical dead space and physiological dead space. Anatomical dead space extends from nose up to the terminal bronchiole. Why we are calling this space as a dead space is they are necessary. Now, the parts of the respiratory system are nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli. But we are aware that in alveoli only the gaseous exchange is taking place. So all the parts before alveoli are necessary for the transport of air into the alveoli, or they're essential to reach that alveoli. But they are not exactly helping in the gaseous exchange. They're not helping in the gaseous exchange. So the air is used up in those spaces. Anatomical dead space extends from nose up to the terminal bronchiole. It includes nose, pharynx, trachea, bronchi, and branches of bronchi up to terminal bronchioles. These structures serve only as the passage of air movement, but gaseous exchange does not take place in these structures. Okay. Okay. Did you come to know why we call it as anatomical dead space?
Yes, doc.
Yes. Somebody, please unmute yourself. Any one of you. Mala will be given an opportunity later. Any one of you unmute yourself and tell me parts of the respiratory system.
It's a nose, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and alveoli.
Very good, very good. Good attempt. Perfect. Now, your friend has told all these parts of respiratory system, but your friend is also aware it is the alveoli only where the gaseous exchange is taking place. Now, we were worried about where the 1.8 liter of oxygen is going, or the gas air is going. That air is held up, or it is in these structures. These are the pathways. So our core part is the alveoli. To reach that core part of the alveoli, all these act as a pathway, that is the nose, pharynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, etc. So it is the air is trapped in these. The air is trapped in these structures, and hence it is not visible in our alveolar ventilation. Okay, next. Physiological dead space. Physiological dead space includes anatomical dead space plus two additional volumes. So air in the alveoli which are non-functioning. In some respiratory diseases, alveoli do not function because of dysfunction or destruction of alveolar membrane. Air in the alveoli which do not receive adequate blood flow. Now, we studied about two dead spaces. One is anatomical, one is physiological dead space. So anatomical dead space is, we know from the nose till the terminal bronchiole is the anatomical dead space. Coming to the physiological dead space is, sometimes I told you that pneumonia is a condition where the alveoli, instead of being filled with air, it is filled with fluid. Okay. Now, or any disease of the alveoli, whenever alveoli is having disease, that time alveoli will not be functioning. And there are certain alveoli which do not receive adequate blood flow, which do not receive adequate blood flow. Then those structures also are included under physiological dead space. Anatomical dead space are from the nose till the terminal bronchioles, whereas physiological dead space is from the nose till the alveoli which are diseased, and also the alveoli which are not receiving adequate blood flow. These two additional volumes are generally considered as wasted ventilation. Where it is not used up, it is called as wasted ventilation. Okay, moving on to the last part. Okay, dead space is usually 150 ml. Okay, just we'll leave this. Regulation of respiration. The respiration is having the control centers. Respiration is having the control centers, the centers and the effectors. Okay, the control center is in the brain stem. We studied in the previous session for inspiration. So that is in the medulla oblongata. When there is an input into these respiratory centers can be initiated from higher brain centers in order to produce voluntary breathing. So just understand that the respiration is under the control of the medulla oblongata, which is a part of the brain stem. Medulla oblongata, which is a part of the brain stem. Okay. Thank you. Yes. So your questions are welcome. Revision is welcome. Yes. So I want everyone to tell me the parts here. What is this I'm pointing at?
Okay, the nose.
Yeah. What are these yellow structures?
Is that the
That's
sinuses?
about the sinuses. Above
Paranasal
the
sinuses.
eyes, above the eyes.
Paranasal sinuses, that will be the frontal and maxillary. Okay. Yes. Now, what is this?
The trachea.
Trachea.
Perfect. What is this?
A branch of the trachea.
Going into the bronchiole. Yeah.
Bronchi. Okay. What are these?
They look like veins.
Bronchioles.
Yeah.
What are these?
Bronchioli.
Bronchioli. Yes, very good. Bronchioli end up in alveoli. Very good. Yes. Yes. So we studied that we have extra upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract, nose, pharynx, and larynx. Nose, pharynx, and larynx, they comprise the upper respiratory tract, and trachea, bronchioles, alveoli, etc. constitute the lower respiratory tract. Okay. Now we have different structures for nose, etc. So here, next moving on to types of respiration. One is external, the other one is internal respiration. External respiration is the exchange of gases between the alveoli and the blood. Internal respiration is the exchange of gases between the blood and the tissues. Between the blood and the tissues. Is this clear? So you may have questions regarding external respiration and internal respiration, and also regarding parts of the respiratory system. Now, we have a diaphragm, we have muscular structure called the diaphragm, which it separates the please kindly mute yourself. Don't make me repeat this again and again. So diaphragm separates the the chest from the abdomen. Diaphragm separates the chest from the abdomen. It's a muscular structure. It's a muscular structure. Then we have something called as, we all of us know, we are aware of inspiration and expiration. So what are the structures that are helping us in inspiration and expiration? Yes, who would want to tell this? Inspiration and expiration. Yeah. The other thing, the lungs are protected within the rib cage. The lungs are protected within the rib cage. Yes. Anybody would want to tell me the inspiration process? How is it happening within the body?
Ma'am, hello.
I
Yes.
do that now. Oh,
Ma'am, well, inspiration. So uh, the uh, the diaphragms increase the volume,
You're telling
and
about breathing in or breathing out. 1 second, Lavunai. You're telling about breathing in or breathing out?
breathe in. So
Breathing.
diaphragm,
Okay, yeah.
yeah. So diaphragm, it will be expanded, and after that it will, your lungs also it will get expanded.
Perfect.
Yeah, and your rib cage is will be completely rising, and while exhale is completely compress the diaphragm as well lungs.
Okay, you have understood. See, whatever you tell for inspiration, totally exactly opposite is happening for expiration. Your attempt is good. Good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else want to attempt? It was correct what he has told. He has understood the concept. Anybody else? Reggie would want to try?
Yes, ma'am. During inspiration, diaphragm goes downward and the rib cages will elevate and lungs will get expand. During exhalation, lungs will go for the normal, recoil to the original position and diaphragm will move upward. Rib cage also come to their normal position.
Okay, okay, very good, very good. Yes. So we have studied about inspiration and expiration, the changes. Yeah. So for the movement of the rib cage, we are having the intercostal muscles which are helping them. Okay. Pyrometer is one of the functions, one of the instrument used to tell us about the functioning of the lungs. Yes. Next, we have something called as ventilation. Ventilation is of two types: pulmonary ventilation and alveolar ventilation. Pulmonary ventilation is wherein you see that we are only concerned about the amount of air entering into the lungs and leaving from the lungs. Amount of air entering into the respiratory system and leaving the respiratory system. Whereas alveolar ventilation is that wherein the amount of air that is entering into the lungs, how much of it is utilized in the exchange of respiratory gases, how much of it is used in the exchange of respiratory gases. Now we have something called as dead space. We have two dead space: anatomical dead space and physiological dead space. Anatomical dead space is the structures from the nose till the terminal bronchiole. Physiological dead space is the space, it is anatomical dead space plus two extra structures, that is alveoli which are diseased and also alveoli which did not receive adequate blood flow. So this completes. Now next, the brain, the respiratory system is under the control of medulla oblongata, which is a part of the brain stem. Yes, I have tried to summarize. If you have any questions, can be asked now.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
If this our session is mostly finished, then can you please repeat from the lungs, because I missed some. Yeah, I missed from the lungs till little bit in between because my internet interruption because of that. Can you
Okay.
repeat please from?
Yeah, see, here I have displayed an image here. This is again for the inspiration and expiration. So we studied that rib cage moves up and out, etc. So just, yeah, I will come back to you. Meanwhile, just this image. See, when the air is entering into the lungs, the lungs are getting elongated and the diaphragm is being pushed downwards, and we see that the rib cage is moving upwards and outwards. Okay. Next, here in case of expiration, rib cage is moving downwards and inwards, diaphragm relaxes and moves up, and also pressure in the lungs increases and air is pushed out. This is again one more important diagram for the inspiration and expiration. Okay, so your friend was asking me about the lungs. Lungs are a pair of spongy structures. Lungs are a pair of spongy structures. We have two lungs. One is the right lung and the left lung. Left lung has a cardiac notch. Left lung has a cardiac notch. And left lung has two lobes. Right lung has three lobes. Right lung has three lobes. They weigh up to 500 to 600 grams. They are pinkish in color, but in smokers they tend to be grayish or smoky gray in color. Now here in the lungs we have bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli. Bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli. Yes. The person who asked me to repeat, what else do you want me to explain?
Ma'am, from the lungs, from this chapter till further, little bit you have to explain, because I couldn't found after that page because of internet issues.
My laptop will be shutting in few minutes. Let me see what all I have explained. See, right lung, left lung, I told you. Then I told you about the diaphragm. Diaphragm is a muscular organ, is a muscle proper. It is separates the abdomen from, it separates the thorax from the abdomen, or it separates the chest from the abdomen, and you all know it is helpful in respiration. Next, external respiration, internal respiration. External respiration is the gases exchange between the blood and alveoli, whereas the internal respiration is the gases exchange between the blood and the tissues. It is the gases exchange between the blood and the tissues. Now, external respiration. So, through external respiration, the alveoli is giving out oxygen and taking the carbon dioxide from the blood, whereas through internal respiration, the oxygenated blood is going to the tissues and the deoxygenated blood or the carbon dioxide blood is given to the carbon dioxide is given to the blood. Oxygen from the blood is taken up by the tissues and carbon dioxide is taken up by the blood. So that is with respect to uh, external and internal respiration. Next, oxygen along with hemoglobin is called as oxyhemoglobin. Carbon dioxide along with hemoglobin is carbaminohemoglobin. Then next, the mechanism of breathing. We have been repeating this twice or thrice. Okay. Next, pulmonary function test. Spirometer is an instrument which will help us record the tidal volume, etc., or help us in telling the functioning of the respiratory system. We have pulmonary ventilation and alveolar ventilation. Ventilation, I think you were there. Mala, any doubts?
Doctor, with the left and right lungs, the right lungs having 3 lobes and the left lung having 2 lobes, the volume of air in both of them, is that less in the right? In the left?
No,
The
not.
volume.
We
Is it
have
compromised?
No, it's not compromised. When we talk about the tidal volume, etc., I told you here, tidal
Yeah.
volume means the volume. If we are not measuring it for individual lung, we are measuring it for both lungs.
Yes.
We are measuring
So,
it for both. Now, when we said for ventilation, we said that for pulmonary ventilation, it is the 6 liters of air. 6 liters of air. When we are talking about 6 liters of air, it is from both lungs.
Yeah.
We don't take it separately for one lung. We consider them as a whole.
All right. And the next question is, this: if someone's suffering pleurisy, what does that mean and what causes that?
Pleurisy is the collection of pus. Pleurisy is the collection of pus. Instead of air in the lung, pus that is being present in the lungs. That is an infection which has led to it.
Okay.
We studied that the lungs are covered by pleural membrane, parietal pleura and visceral pleura. So within that pleural membrane, there is pleural fluid. That pleural fluid is having pus collection.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so shall we end the session?
Yes, thank you, Doc. What's the next section that we're going to be doing for Monday?
Just a second, I'll see you on the screen.
Okay.
It will be cardiovascular system.
Huh?
Cardiovascular system, study about the heart.